Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Tim Fullerton, and I am the president and CEO of Fullerton Strategies, a digital marketing agency, and want to welcome you all to our conversation about the state of influencer marketing. And we have a great panel today we will be talking to for the next, depending on questions, 30 minutes to an hour about all things influencer marketing. And I think the great thing about this is that we've got experts in the nonprofit political arena and also in the direct to consumer market. So we'll be able to cover the whole spectrum of influencer marketing today. But first I want to introduce our panel, or actually have them introduce themselves. So first I'm going to turn to Tiffany to introduce herself.
Thank you, Tim. I'm so excited to do this. I own an influencer marketing agency called Guild Creative Group. I also am the founder of a SaaS platform called Represent, and it is focused on creator sustainability. My company, my agency, we really practice working with brands who really have a desire to strengthen their relationships. And so for us, it's all about how can we do that with talent-oriented solutions and content and experiences.
That's great. And Ryan?
Nice to meet you, Tiffany. I'm Ryan Davis. I'm the co-founder and COO of People First. We are a precision micro-influencer agency that work with nonprofits, political campaigns, and brands on influencer work. And I think one of the things that we do that's sort of interesting is work with influencers who are not sort of capital I, but niche influencers and real people. That's sort of our specialty.
That's great. And we're also this is our first international LinkedIn Live. Ryan, you're in Bogota?
I'm in Bogota. Yeah, I'm doing a nomad year this year, and so not in Brooklyn as much as I have been for the last 20 years, but it's a lovely day here in Bogota.
Yeah. Well, and Ryan is coming to us from a building that is owned by a company that both Tiffany and I worked at, which is WeWork. So the world is small and it keeps going around and around. So
no matter where you are, the best internet at a WeWork.
One thing that they invested in.
Well, let's move on from that, which they just got a free product placement, but good for them. We'll have to send them a bill. But just to start off, the title of this is The State of Influencer Marketing. And I would just, influencer marketing has sort of been going on, it's really not even a decade old yet, right? And Tiffany mentioned before we got on that she was doing it before it was even called a thing. And I think we all probably were dabbling in a little bit. But Tiffany, I'd love to start with you with sort of what are you seeing right now? And, maybe talk about some of the general, most effective ways that you have seen right now people using influencers effectively.
So I feel, I really resonated with Ryan with what you said with People First, because that's kind of my heart posture when it comes to working with creatives and talent. My background, I've been in talent management and creativity. So always being close to the creative, but, when you're working in influencer marketing, it is a commercial tactic to work with people to spread a message ultimately. And the difference between maybe then and now is that there are more people that have a audience and sometimes a sizable audience. And so what marketers have sort of even trained talent to do is to value that audience size, but most people are kind of hacking that so that they have this large audience so that they can charge more. I like working with influential people as well. So it's not enough that you have this large audience size. I'm encouraged to learn more about engagement rates. If I put you out in the world, do people care? Will people know you? What is your point of view on culture? What is your point of view on, your creativity, your output? I think those are things that just won't change no matter what we call it, no matter what slice we give it. So what I'm seeing are brands that want to engage with people who have a point of view and people that have, a great creative output, because that's really, you're willing to spend more money on something like that because it matters it matters to the brand that they're working in alignment with someone who has shared values with them. So I think on one side of the fence, it's, less about like follower count and reach. And although that's always going to be a great metric, it's like, okay, cool. The main thing is are we values aligned, and are you someone who has a point of view on culture that has an audience that we can continue to talk through, and from a commercial aspect, pull through the marketing funnel so that they're in a consideration set for, an idea or a purchase. I always, and I think you can appreciate this, Ryan, like in influencer marketing, sometimes it's not always about the drive to purchase. It's also the drive to consider an idea, or a point of view.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead. I think that you've hit on lots of things that we're going to keep digging into, but that was great. So Ryan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Tiffany's point of view here. I think, Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message, but the messenger is also the message. So I think one of the things we try to do is convince the organizations and the brands that we're working with that it's not only about follower count. It's does this person have a personality and a demographic and a geographic sort of matched for the audience that you're trying to persuade? Are they going to make a quality piece of content that's going to speak to the audiences you're looking to reach? And then, through the magic of the paid partnership tag or, Spark ads on TikTok, you can take that content and put it in front of the exact audience. So I think, people get really hung up on capital I influencers and really large follower accounts when, those folks have pretty weak ties to a lot of their followers. But if you're working with somebody who looks like you might go to church with them or go to school with them or work with them, those people are going to be more persuasive about a lot of issues. So that rings true to me.
So I want to dig into this because I think a lot of people think of influencers as, the Kardashians of the world, right? Hundreds of millions of followers, or, and are getting paid millions of dollars per posts and things like that. But I think, I think what a lot of, and we saw this at WeWork too, like a lot of people are, Ryan and Tiffany, you hit on this, like, you're right. Like, I want to talk a little bit more about, like, our macro, the large ones, like, is there a world for those anymore, especially in the business and political nonprofit worlds? Or do you think that the market has shifted almost exclusively to what I would refer to as the micro influencers, which are really more those sub 100,000 followers and more? So Tiffany, I'd love to hear from you first.
Well, I think there's room under the sun for everyone. So I definitely think that, the mix is important. People want to have the reach. And so there's always going to be like the macros that are important. But what's interesting to me has been the rise of like the B2B creator. And that to me has been like, wait, I didn't even know that was going to happen. Like, I really didn't. And, but I'm not surprised, but I didn't realize that the B2B creator was going to be such a thing. And I think for these sort of like more serious, it sounds bad saying, but like a more serious things that happen, whether it's climate change or business or political or whatever, like we're looking to a B2B creator versus, like, no disrespect, but like a Kardashian to tell us, like, what are your thoughts on that? Because at the end of the day, we're operating in the economics of trust. That's what influencer marketing is, right? And so whose currency do I trust and whose point of view, makes the most sense? But I think if I'm sitting in the influencer seat and I'm like, okay, I want to build my niche and my brand, it does serve me to grow my audience and to grow my brand and be consistent in that. And I can sell along the way, because the truth of the matter is, no matter what kind of media you are, the more the more space or you take up, the more brands want to participate with you, the more you're able to, create your own sort of economic wealth for yourself as a creator, as an influencer. So I don't think there's a wrong way to do it, but I definitely think there's depending on where you're sitting, there's value in, sort of blooming where you're planted, whether you're a nano or micro, all the way up to celeb.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think about it as sort of like a pyramid where on top you've got sort of the celebrities and the macros who are doing that top-down messaging. And then you've got sort of those mid-tier folks who might be niche, but have pretty sizable audiences, 50, 100,000 folks. And you've got the micros underneath that are doing sort of the bottom-up messaging. So I think, when we work with a client, we want to understand, what are the goals and what is the right mix, to hit those objectives.
Mm-hmm.
Into the B2B thing, I think it's fascinating, right? Like I've seen Tim complain about LinkedIn spam. It's such a thing. I get message 4 times a day about how I could get more leads generated. I'm like, is this how you're going to generate the leads? You're going to spam? You're going to spam everyone? So I think, the idea of working with a B2B creator who's an expert in HR or an expert in, account management or SaaS products or whatever that is a really unique way to get your message out in a much more classy, less a way that's not going to hurt your brand as much as just seeing how much you can sort of spam somebody on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I want to hit on that because we have at least one LinkedIn influencer on this session right now who's chatted on the side, Liam. There has been a rise of LinkedIn influencers, right? Like we generally think of influencers as the folks on Instagram, TikTok, maybe to a lesser extent X, Twitter. I'm not calling it X, Twitter. But with sort of the Twitter exodus, there's been this huge audience swell on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's at about 1 billion users now. I'd love to hear your thoughts on LinkedIn influencers and how brands could use those effectively, both from a consumer perspective, but probably even more specifically to that B2B world.
Mm. Ryan, I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I think we did a campaign with a healthcare company, and they wanted to get their product in front of key decision makers at health insurance companies. So we worked with a handful of LinkedIn creators, and then we took that content and we just the LinkedIn ad targeting is just like outrageously good, right? Like you can get down to the where somebody works, the level that they work at, et cetera. And so we were able to put that content directly in front of those key decision makers at these health insurance companies. So I think that there's a lot you can do with LinkedIn. I totally agree that nobody benefited more from Elon Musk's poor management of Twitter X than LinkedIn. And I've seen a lot of those conversations that were happening in the startup world and in the business world move from X, where there's a ton of brand liability. Like you don't want to post your startup and then the next thing is like a swastika, right? Like that's not a great way to present your brand, and that's not happening on LinkedIn that I've seen. So I do think that LinkedIn's been a place where a lot of these voices are starting to develop in the B2B influencer space. And you got a Kardashian. She's great if you're launching a fashion or a beauty or a travel brand, but it doesn't make any sense for a health insurance company to work with Kim Kardashian.
No, I mean, it's interesting. And first of all, Liam says he's not an influencer, but he's just heard people follow. He's got 40,000 followers. He's an influencer. But anyways, it's interesting. I have a WeWork story, and I don't tell too many WeWork stories because most of us kind of keep some of that close to the vest. But this is all public stuff. But when I joined sort of on the rocket ship up, we were really focused on growing. And I ran this, one of the things I did was run the social team, and we were really focused on follower growth and like increasing our brand awareness and things like that, not just from an organic perspective, but also to get outside people. So we actually worked with a couple of very large accounts, like in the million range, and spent way too much money, and really for the goal of follower growth. And it was a failure. Like we spent all this money and we got nowhere. Years later, when I was sort of running all of digital at WeWork, we changed our approach when we had launched the ability to book a desk by the hour or an office by the hour, or by the day, or by a month. And so we actually partnered with an agency and brought in a bunch of micro influencers, and we bartered 3 months of space in return for pushing a 50% off discount on the day passes, and the ROI on that was 3 to 1. And I'm not even talking about the brand lift. So it's really interesting, you know, when you look at, you know, macro, right? Like if you, you know, like if you got Taylor Swift to do something for you, of course, like it'll be everyone's dream, right? But like in the reality, it's like finding those niche audiences. And I think it's the same for LinkedIn. You know, like I see there's a company called Teal, which Tiffany knows some of the folks at that over there, Leah and Dave Fano. They do a lot of work with resume building and creating and like helping people find jobs. And they've done a lot of work actually with some people that I know, having, you know, paying them to talk about their products. And it's perfect because these people are talking about LinkedIn, they're talking about career and things like that. And it's just a really smart strategy. So I think we're going to see more and more on the LinkedIn side of this sort of rise of B2B influencers, because frankly, like, you know, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, guys, but like having somebody in your feed telling you that like this thing is great is going to make you more likely to look at it. I mean, I got a video tool from, I'm not going to keep blowing up his space here, but like a recommendation of someone on this live that like, you know, I wouldn't have known about. And like, I got that. So, you know, I think there's just going to be a rise.
Well, I mean, listen, and the word of mouth goes very far because both me and Ryan were like, wait, what is this? I didn't know about this. And then now we go use it. So like, shout out to you, you know, and I think that's why this is an exciting space. There's a company I'm putting a proposal for right now where, you know, they have a B2B business and they're using creators, B2B creators, to say, hey, like we put out these reports and we put out these things. We want you to talk about it. And, you know, the way that they do that and the way that they value that, you know, it's one of these things I find like truly like interesting, especially when it comes to, and if I'm being really honest with you, like I would trust a B2B creator, especially one that where you can go look at their resume. You can go and see like, oh no, they know what they're talking about. And I would, you know, I would expect that the trust would be a bit higher if they were like, actually, these trends are whack. I'm not doing that. Like, because people, you know, people want me to tell them the truth, not just take the check, you know, which I think is really, interesting. We haven't talked about this yet, but the other trend that I also find fascinating is UGC influencers.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, that is so, like, it's really, I think it's really smart for small businesses. So in the agency space, you know, I haven't worked with a lot of emerging businesses. I did in the beginning, but like I started to, you know, when you own a business, you're like profit margin, da, 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 da. So you start to go in the other direction. And I was like, but you know, I'm a people person. So I'm like, I hate when a great business like comes to me as like, we need influencer marketing help. And I'm like, well, do you have $100,000? Like, it's like, no. So like, how can we, you know, how can we support, you know, some of these smaller emerging businesses to get what they need in the market? And it is working with nanos and influence and micros, but we're putting together this offer right now that's called My First Influencer Program. And it's really meant to help smaller businesses understand like, no, you too can play in this space, but you know, here's what you need to do. And we'll support you with a mini strategy and curation doc and all that good stuff. But I find that like a lot of folks don't even know that you can work with talent and it not even be using them as like the media distribution tool. It's like use them as the content creator, you know, like that's exciting to me as well. And I think more businesses, especially smaller businesses, are getting into it.
And I think that I'm so glad you brought up costs. I want to turn to Ryan here in a second because he deals with a lot of political and nonprofits that frankly don't have budgets, but it also plays into small businesses as well. So yeah, so following on that, Ryan, like I'd love to hear your thoughts about like how you guys build packages to organizations that maybe don't have like Tiffany said, 100 grand for this, right? Like how do you go about doing that in a way that's valuable to them?
Yeah, so we actually launched something called People First Express, which is sort of a scaled down version of our agency offering. So you can still get the big fancy offering that's probably 90% of our clients. But if you just are an organization or a business that needs, just want some high quality creator content, to the UGC point, like, we've created a way to do that that won't break the bank. And I think that, people focus so much on the organic reach of creators, and they don't think enough about the basically you're getting 15 creative directions that you can optimize and test and see what works. You can learn from a creator that might position something in a certain way that you can then say, hey, that really works, I'm going to use that in my brand messaging. So I think the organizations that are using creators the smartest way are like focusing on doing testing. They're learning from the different spins. They're playing on multiple platforms to see where they get the best ROI, and they're not just sort of like doing this kind of big TikTok or big Instagram work.
And I think that for certain groups, there are ways to do it either low cost or almost essentially no cost. I sort of mentioned the WeWork model. There was a cost associated with working on that, but the influencers we bartered with them. But when I was a digital director at the Department of Interior during the Obama administration, and we did an influencer program that cost us zero. For folks who remember the earthquake in DC in 2013 that actually damaged the Washington Monument, it took 2 years to repair it, but when we were ready to open it, we were thinking of ways to get in front of people or do new and different things. And so we came up with like having a contest for having people apply to come and use their Instagram accounts to spread the word about the Washington Monument opening. And the people who were selected got to go up, be the first ones to go up with the Secretary of the Interior, who was Sally Jewell at the time. And we had a amazing response, and like we did a questionnaire and we asked people why they wanted to come, and we got these amazing stories. So we're able to use the stories as well as, obviously, we asked for follower count to see who had reach and stuff. Worked with Instagram, and actually one of the people was featured on the CBS Evening News because he was a teacher from Orlando who worked in an underserved community and used Instagram to show people, his students, the world. And so we did a whole thing. So like there are ways to do these things too, I think, that don't necessarily break the bank. You just have to figure out like what your hook is, right? How you do that.
I think that one of the things we say is like we service end-to-end influencer capabilities, but people forget about experiences sometimes. And I don't mean the Coachella influencer experience. I mean like the intimate experience. And there are things that I'll pitch to a company and I'm like, I'll see like they won't do it. And then I'll see another brand do it. And I'm like, see, they did it right. Because, when you have things that are kind of a little bit harder to sell, like you want to, for instance, if a brand problem, there was a fashion company, they had a brand problem where they felt like their sustainable brand, clothing brand, but they felt like they didn't have a audience with African-American women. And I was like, well, why don't you do an event, invite the girlies, send them a package, 3 ideas, everybody, but like send them a package of an outfit that they get to choose from your website and invite them to the dinner. They can wear the outfit or not, but they probably will, because it's like, if you're going to that company's dinner, wear the clothes that they gave you. And then have a beautiful dinner, maybe even a talk with someone that's like, a leader in sustainability practices in fashion that happens to be African-American, talking to that company's, designer or whoever. They're going to take pictures while they're there. That's what they're going to do. That is their behavior. If it's beautiful, people take pictures of it. That's not rocket science. So make it beautiful, invite people, and that's it. And the thing is that people want to go because it's not a no-name brand. It's a brand you're like, did you get the invite? And so like if people do that and you get them in the photos, like they're gonna think that they're gonna know that like, oh wow, like maybe this does work. Maybe we should be entering the conversation, because the insight was And it was unfortunate, but one of the things that I heard was at that company, at that fashion company, they didn't talk to African American consumers because they just made this up, but like they thought that African Americans didn't wear the clothes well or wear them properly, which is insane. I promise, if I'm lying, I'm dying. I promise you. When I heard that, I was like, that just sounds stupid. And so yeah, send them clothes, bring it there, have a photographer there. If you knew how to take pictures of people, then maybe you would think differently. So
Right.
like then you show them, you show your art directors and your creative directors these photos of women looking fabulous in these clothes and change the behavior, you
Right.
know? So like some of this stuff is like, yes, influencer and how to create experiences for people, but some of it also is brands that need to maybe shift how they're thinking about people. And like, how can you work with talent or influencers to shift your perspective of what you think people think of your brand and
Right.
let them tell you? Like, put a little, like, dip a toe in the water and create an experiment that is low lift, that is low cost,
Right.
and let people, like, let yourself be curious enough about people to see like, oh, it didn't occur to us to create a targeted paid ad towards that group of people or this behavior or folks that live in this city, but maybe we should and see what happens.
Mhm.
This is why I love the work that we do.
Yeah.
So I think I totally I love the event that you're talking about, Tiffany, and I would love to see something with like a little more of a long tail, or maybe after that initial thing they recruit 50 Black women to talk more about the brand over like the long term and kind
Yeah.
of like invest in that. But I think, Tim, like your idea is very blue state. It's a very blue state kind of like 2010 idea that worked really well at that moment in time. But I think people have gotten a little like cynical about things. Now, obviously, the experience you're describing is super cool, but most organizations don't have like a Washington Monument reopening.
Right.
Like that's like that's a pretty high profile invite. But I get a lot of like DM spam. My Twitter and my Instagram offering me like T-shirts and jewelry, and it's clear they haven't even like looked at my account. Like it wouldn't even make sense for me to do this, right? Like they're just spamming as many people as possible, and I worry that that's sort of like that is just not the way to do it. Like you have to be really thoughtful about the folks that you're working with, and in both your examples, these organizations were like, who makes sense to come to this party, who makes sense to come to the Washington Monument opening. So yeah, I think approaching it strategically, putting real time and effort into making the event something that is like worth going to. Because I've seen some of these some organizations want to invite people to something. I'm like, it's not going to play the way you think it's going to play. It's so yeah.
So let's talk about, and this is something I think about all the time with my agency, and I think we've been sort of talking around it, but I want to dive into it. And that it's my favorite word in 2024, which is authenticity. So, and I think playing off Ryan's, yeah, you're right. Like this, we did that in the early days of Instagram, and it sort of was like a very happy, shiny moment and all those things. But, you're right. Like the world in content, social in general is oversaturated, and there is a lot of inauthentic content. And I think there's been some discussions on LinkedIn about how because everyone is saying push, 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 then you're actually getting worse content. And then that is not a very authentic experience for anybody that follows you. So I would love to hear about where authenticity sits when you're thinking about your strategies and like potentially what types of influencers you could bring in to what.
I mean, I think authenticity is everything. Like, especially as we move, and if we're talking specifically about LinkedIn, I think they've built in too many tools to let you use AI to generate content. And that's going to lead to like a whole lot of mediocrity in the content that's being generated. And so I would encourage folks to not use those tools if they can. AI is great for like grammar checking and things like that, but I can tell when your LinkedIn post has been written by AI, and I'm not going to read that. So I think working with creators who want, if they're a real match for the organization or the brand or the campaign, they're going to come up with something that is kind of unique to them, and not being too salesy. We still get requests for things that are like, very feel like ads, and the best influencer content is like, I care about XYZ, and that's why this brand or organization matters to me. It's not like this organization is the best organization ever. Like that immediately turns people off. You want to make that personal connection. There's a thing in politics called deep canvassing, and it's this idea you go to someone's house and you knock on the door, and you don't say, vote for Barack Obama. You say, I want to talk to you about criminal justice reform and why it matters to me. And then you share a personal story, and you engage with that person on a one-to-one level. And the more that influencer content and creator content can do that, the more effective it's going to be than just saying like, vote for Barack Obama.
Right. Yeah. Tiffany, how do you how do you work authenticity in the work you're doing with your clients?
I feel like from like the strategy perspective, starting there. So, when I'm working with a client and they tell me their problem, they're coming to us for a talent-oriented solution. And so part of what it is me and my team being able to sort of restate their problem and understand like, oh, this type of communication problem needs, to Ryan's point, like this type of connection point. And, and you're going to need agency in that space. And you garner that from working with this group of people or this type of talent that has a point of view. Right.
Yeah.
And so I love Ryan, when you said the sales ad thing, I just, for whatever reason, ShamWow came to my mind. Do you remember like ShamWow? Like it's just like there's so much of that there where it's like more, go, push. And it's like, bro, like relax. Like just if you would just, you could have just, you had me at, it cleans real fast. Like these are my issues. We have the similar issues. Like show me the solution. And especially if you're already like, I didn't even invite you here, and now you're here. Like, don't piss me off if you're here. Like I didn't even invite you. I didn't even ask for you. So like, might as well like get into my, just sort of get into my feelings a little bit. And I feel like authenticity sort of starts at that strategy point, and then it's felt. Like when talent produces the content. And even if we're doing captions or if they're showing up somewhere, it has to be felt. And so, Ryan, you mentioned this earlier, but like, I think great advertising, great marketing is when you don't think about it. And like, it's like when you walk into, when someone, like for me, like when I go to a bar and someone's like, oh, how was the drink? Da, da, da. I was like, if I didn't say anything, it's fine. Like, cause I wanted to say something. And it's like, it's fine. Like, if I don't think anything about it, I love it.
Right.
Because,
And I've talked about this a fair amount on my feed, but I have this theory that, performance media, meaning advertising, is in essence a dying field because we're so consumed with media right now, right? That like the second you feel like you're being sold to, you've turned off, right? And I think that's why that spam stuff is so frustrating in the other tab in the in-mail, is because they're not tailored. It's just blast and spray. And I've said, like, if someone wants to pitch me and just make it tailored to me and I will read it. I might not use and I've actually written to people in the rare occasion that I get something tailored. I actually say, thank you for doing that, because otherwise it's just a turnoff. And I think the same is with the influence. And Tiffany, you're 100% right. Like if it feels like an advertisement, it's over. But and that's why the authenticity, I think, is so important, because then if you are able to find the right influencers to partner with and work with, it doesn't feel like advertising. It feels like it's a natural piece of content that has been generated by that person. And it could, like a person with 5,000 followers, you might have far better impact than with somebody even who has 500,000 or 1,000,000 who's just completely random, and these people don't know. So I think, yeah, right. Go ahead.
Well, Tiffany was talking earlier about the creators at the top of the funnel, and I think that is a really key insight here, because creators are going to warm up an audience, and they're going to introduce people to your idea or your product, and then further down the funnel, you can use more traditional, like call to action heavy, like branded ads to convert folks. But they already have the idea, or they've already thought about it, because they've spent time with your creators, hopefully a few of them, right? So you're kind of creating this surround sound effect where all of a sudden everybody's talking about XYZ, and then it's like, oh, XYZ, I've heard of that. Like, I'm going to click on that to learn more. Yeah. I think that it's really effective when you're building a marketing funnel to have creators in various aspects of it kind of like driving you to conversion.
And that works for both the direct-to-consumer and also a political or nonprofit, right? Because as you mentioned about the deep canvassing, which, by the way, not to get too political here, but like I have a theory that Biden is going to overperform because there was no field work in 2020 due to COVID, and Trump did. So I think some of this we're going to start seeing as people start explaining that. But I think you're right. Like, you don't come from it of a like vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump, but like you say, criminal justice reform or infrastructure or schools and something like that. And then it's like, and that's the same, I assume, Tiffany, for in your world too, clients, that, you don't just say buy LaCroix, right? You make it about, I don't know, this refreshing drink, or whatever, but like
no calorie,
no calorie. Yeah.
Right.
So anyway,
when you think of springtime, you feel effervescent, don't you?
Right. I can't believe we've already marketed two products that neither of us work with. I don't know if we're not doing the right job here. But,
maybe you're manifesting something for us right now.
Well, another thing, and because we're talking a lot about top of funnel, right? And Ryan, you mentioned some of this, like it's almost brand awareness, and then you hit them with advertising. The challenge with all of this, which is also the challenge with marketing, or frankly any digital communication work, is measuring success, right? ROI, which marketing, this will never fully be solved, right? Because some of this is exactly what you guys have mentioned. It's like, you mention a product, and then like you mentioned it again, there's a reason why Coca-Cola spends, I don't know, $1 to 3 billion, I think I saw the other day, a year for a product that everybody knows, right? So how do you measure, and how do you go to a client and tell them that like their program has been successful?
You want to go first, Tiffany?
Well, I feel like there's the answer that is what is the message matching answer, and then there's like Tiffany's answer. So like when we start the program or start whatever we're doing, we ask them straight up, like, what would make this successful for you? Like, what does success look like? And if it's reach and engagement, if it's a metric, then it's like, okay, great, let's try and work towards those things. And sometimes it's not a metric. Like, there have been plenty of programs and things that I've done where there wasn't a clear measure of success, and it was a feeling. It was, the CEO liked it, and so now that was success. Yay. It's like, okay, and that works for me too. But the Tiffany answer is, this is going to sound so woo-woo, whatever, but in this world, this is all like, we're just all playing in the matrix, and none of this really matters. Like, people spend money to get messages out into the world, baseline, and the success of that, the ROI of that, is the messages in the world. When people ask, what is the ROI on a billboard in Times Square? And someone's like, well, 46 million people walk through Times Square. Shut up.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, shut up, so, but if there's an action, you can measure actions. Like, did someone go to the website? Did someone purchase? Did someone? Yes, that is, and you can correlate that, to programmatic work. Yes, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes a lot of us, especially as marketers, um, we can sell like half truths or little baby lies about ROI. And the reality is that like it isn't always apples to apples. Like it isn't always I
Yeah.
put 10 in, I got 10 out. It doesn't
Mhm.
work like that,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and Ryan, I'm curious because you work with a lot of nonprofit and political clients where obviously you can't say like we got this many voters or this many people registered or like, how do you do that with clients that, aren't selling a product specifically and be able to like show success on that?
Yeah.
So when we've had budget and interest from large political groups like the Democratic Governors Association, we did a campaign with them where we were able to basically do a survey of folks who followed our creators versus folks who didn't follow our creators, who followed other creators who didn't work in our program. In the state of Virginia, we ran a survey with Survey 160, and we saw a 46% bump in Democratic message recall from users who followed their creators. And when you're talking about an election like that, Virginia gubernatorial, where there's probably $100 million being spent, total on each side, that kind of bump is really significant. And amongst folks who said they were frequent users of social media, that number was even higher. So it is difficult to but that is not every client wants to spend a lot of money and do a fancy research project. So, we put together these proof points and say, we know the tactic works. And then, we come at you with the KPIs that you would expect to see in a digital campaign. When you add paid media on it, you can do conversion tracking and more kind of specific ROI. And I think that can be really useful. And then what's never counted in the ROI conversation is the fact they're getting 50 pieces of content to use on their branded channels, and their newsletter, on their website,
Right.
on and that cost, that alone is, if you went to like a standard agency, is going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think that has to be included in the conversation too, but it's not just what you're getting from the organic play or from the paid play, but the actual content itself is super valuable.
I think people sleep on the content part a lot,
Yeah.
right? Because when I talked about the WeWork success with that micro influencer program, obviously we had promo codes, and we actually did promo codes per influencer. So we were able to see who was successful or not. And then you could obviously measure, like, if the promo code was used, this amount of revenue was brought. So it was very easy. But like, we didn't have a good metric though for saying like, the brand lift and like people who saw the content and, went directly themselves, right? Went to WeWork.com and did it that way. And I think that, it's Ryan doing the surveys and stuff is super fascinating, and being able to point to that is really great. I mean, a 46% lift on recall of a message is really impressive. And I think it's just another sign that like influencers aren't just for direct to consumer world, that they are also a very useful tactic. And, I can say, I know that, at least on the Democratic side, I know that President Biden's reelection campaign is going all in on influencers, and I've seen some of it happening already. And, and I think that they, regardless of your political views, you look at what they're doing, it makes a lot of sense because they're tapping into people. And again, like the right people. It's not just like trying to get, Kim Kardashian's a tricky one because she did some stuff with Trump, but like,
It's the
finding
right thing to do. I mean, I was going to say, if you're, for everything that's happening, everything in this world, that for every action someone takes, there's someone that convinced them of that.
Yeah.
And not even trying to, just sharing, they're just influential, and I think that's his only hope. You have someone who has an ideology, and then you have to build yours. We don't know you. We know you, but we don't know you.
I think that, I think that, well, let's go into the political for a minute, but like, I think the conservative world has a satellite community of influencers with massive reach, right? Like, and I'm not making any comments on what these people say, but like Ben Shapiro, or really even, or any of these people, like they have Daily Wire, like that whole network of people.
It's a good ecosystem, and the Democrats had something like that in the blogosphere, and the alts, and that's never been replaced once it went away. And I think that's a real challenge for Democrats, because like, you know, we have like kind of a okay cable station, you know, but who watches cable news? Like, you know, not the under 40s. And so I think that political persuasion is a war of attrition, and it's not the person with the best message that wins, it's the person with the most messages. And Democrats have always, to a fault, message tested, and is this perfect? Is this the right thing to do? Is this, you know, and Republicans aren't doing any of that. They're just like, you know, get Candace Owens out there talking as much as she possibly can, right? Like, and that is, I think, something that Democrats have always struggled with, and I think that, you know, there's some positive signs that they understand they got to make more content this cycle.
Yeah, well, I mean, a perfect example is, and this is relevant to the influencer thing, but like, you know, there's a myth out there that New York City is the most dangerous city in the country. The reality is, it's not even the top 10 for most dangerous cities in New York State, let alone, you know. But like, having a politician, let's say President Biden, going and saying that isn't going to land with the people who have heard that message. It's people that they follow and they listen to on a daily basis, whether it's on Instagram, probably not LinkedIn too much, or like a podcast they listen to, right? And so like finding those influencers to hammer that message that's literally true is the way I think they're going to break out. And I think that they're starting to do some of that. And you know, the team that he's got is great. His campaign manager, Julie Rodriguez, is a former colleague of mine, and is whip smart, and like they all get it. And I think that's really positive. But you're right, like it's a constant on, and I think that's a place where influencers can help both business world and political or nonprofit, is pumping the message, because you have to pump it over and over and over again.
Fox News doesn't turn off cycle. It never stops, and the whole ecosystem of conservative voices never stops. And we need Democrats to start to enter that world of always on persuasion, and they need to never stop spreading their message.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, we are just about at time. I want to thank everybody for joining with us today. I think we've had a fascinating conversation. I will just say, I'll keep talking for a second. If anyone has any questions, we can get to those now. And actually, we just got one. So I'm going to pull this over. And it is from my old friend, Cynthia, from formerly of the Interior Department as well. It says, what are ways to balance big tent influencer opportunities for broad issues with corners of the tent special issues?
I love that metaphor.
That's
awesome.
That's a great question. I mean, I think it all comes down to, you know, working with messengers who fit your issue category. So, you know, when we helped Planned Parenthood launch their TikTok, they were looking for trans folks to talk about healthcare, and we went and we found those folks. And you know, when we worked with the Bashir campaign, they wanted those purple voters who probably voted for Trump but would feel comfortable voting for Governor Bashir to talk about that and to normalize that behavior. And so you go find those people. So you know, it's really focusing, does the messenger match that message? Do they fit the issue? Can they talk about it in an authentic way? If you came to me to talk about you know, a certain issue, like I might not be the right messenger, and I can't talk about it passionately. But if you came to me to talk about the importance of gun control in New York City, you know, I would be a great, powerful messenger for that. So, you know, finding the people who can really be authentic and they care about it and they're going to speak that, I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like those, I actually think that the corners of the tent is actually a more interesting space, because you can it's harder to find, right? Because as you go narrower, your pool is smaller. But like, talk about having, I would say, an outsized impact compared to the size of the audience. I think that's a really interesting one. You know, the big tent one, like, you know, those are more costly, but maybe more visible. But I think the corners, and thinking about those niche audiences is hugely valuable, because you have to find, as you said, Ryan, like, you know, like for me, like I would not be the right messenger for trans issues, but like finding the right, but finding those voices and those people who are interested, you know, or, you know, Tiffany, it's the same thing with you. You're talking about that particular clothing brand and they say their clothes didn't look good on
Black people.
people in general. Like your way is exactly right. It's like, you know, demystify that by bringing in the right people. So,
And,
I mean,
you know,
Cynthia, very well put, by the way.
on the trans issue thing, you know, the right messenger might, for moderates, might be to get parents of trans kids to talk about this issue, because that might be a way to sort of open up the conversation, right? So it's not always the most obvious messenger. There are people who can be really, I think, powerful and persuasive.
Yeah.
This goes back, and we can go to another one if there's another one. But this is why I am such a big proponent of working with the right agency and the right thinkers, because not for something like this, and whether it's a sort of socio-political issue or whatever, you have to make sure that the folks that are in the room helping you solve the problem are also the right folks that should be solving this problem.
Yes.
Because sometimes what happens is, you know, folks are like, well, they're our agency of record and that's all we got, and you know, and they don't bring in like specialists to support some thinking. Because I think the more, you know, like I could potentially tackle this type, if we use the trans issue, like I could tackle that and think with a sort of diverse landscape, and that's what we do. We love doing that. But at the same time, I would still need to bring someone in who knows that more deeply. So like, how can we, you know, make sure, like, for those of us that are decision makers in brands that are creating influencer programs, both the big team and the corners, I love that metaphor, that you're able to also resource your agencies, resource the people that you have in the room, because having a you know, a problem, I think sometimes people, you know, brands still want, you know, solve this big problem with 2 twigs and a nickel and see what happens, and it's like, help me out, sis. Like, so I think it's kind of, it's I look at the system of it as well, you know.
I completely agree, and I've had some experiences, and Ryan, you can probably speak to this too, but in the nonprofit, I mean, I've worked for several nonprofits, and you know, I remember specifically, I will not say the name of them, but like we were talking about having an event in Chicago around gun violence, and everybody in the room looked like me, and people actually spoke up, which was great. It got solved, but it was like, this is the wrong group to be having this conversation. You're right. Like, if we were if this was an influencer conversation, we wouldn't be the right people to talk about that either. You know, I think that's a very important point, is like, you know, you have to get people who have had some shared experiences that you're trying to influence as part of those conversations, because otherwise you're not going to nail it. And
I love that. Yeah.
But like, you know, that was my experience in several instances, because to be perfectly honest, the nonprofit space tends to look a lot like me.
And we're all human, but we have to have the awareness to know what we don't know. And it's like, does that city have gun violence issues? Yes, everybody knows that. Who's the right person to have the conversations with people that otherwise you're just preaching to the choir? You know, it's like, we're trying to bring folks on the outside into the space, or have some sort of knowledge, or we're trying to go out there and be like, you know. So I love this question. I love the thinking. It makes so much sense.
And don't make all your content only in English. You know, like we've had tremendous success with Spanish language content and Mandarin content, and you know, folks, that kind of content really breaks through, because so many brands are just so kind of, you know, they're just producing kind of this English, and if you're able to create a piece of authentic content in Spanish that's going to speak to a community more directly, you know, you should do that.
Right. I mean, we had at WeWork, it's another example, like massive efforts for regionalized content. And obviously, and you know, if we're just talking about the US, like tens of millions, if not even maybe 100 million people speak a second language. predominantly Spanish, but you're right. Like obviously, like in a particular realm, like you want your languages that are maybe not adopted as many people, but they're in the right spots, right? Mandarin's a perfect example. There's all kinds of different communities, so it's like finding people that can do that with you is really, really important. So, well, we have 5 minutes left, and Cynthia, I'm sorry, Cynthia's asked a second question that is around data privacy, and I just think that is such a massive topic that I don't think we can hammer it out in the next 5 minutes. But I did want to make it clear that like we saw that question. I think that is a question that all of the big tech companies are grappling with, and why we're seeing changes to Google. And the amount of stuff that you're able to grab, but there's still lots of questions, in particular, as Cynthia mentioned here, like in marginalized communities. So that will have to be a topic for a different conversation, but is a very, very important one. So 4 minutes to go. I am gonna give each of you a moment to plug your work and tell everybody where they can find you.
Amazing. I'll go first because ladies first. Again, my name is Tiffany Hardin, and my agency is Guild Creative Group. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I love a LinkedIn buddy. Also, if you go on my LinkedIn page, you're going to see some recent work from my team. We worked with Victoria's Secret on a really awesome piece of content, a mini doc that focuses on 4 Alabama farmers and their direct to source relationship with Victoria's Secret. So think, farm to table. This is more farm to bra and panty in cotton. So it was really a pleasure to work with that team and just to also heal a piece of myself in the process. So find me on LinkedIn. Check out the trailer that is there when you do find me on my page. Sign up for my newsletter, and I'm around. Shoot, I'm around. Y'all gonna find me.
All right, Ryan.
I'm Ryan Davis, and I'm with People First. You can find us at peoplefirst.cc. You can sign up. We have an advocacy newsletter and a brand newsletter that are both really fun. And you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram at Ryan New York. Even though I'm not in New York currently, I'm there quite often. And that Victoria's Secret farmer thing, that sounds like a brilliant campaign. I'm gonna check that out right after this.
Yeah, I see there's a link in the chat, so people can check that out too. And then finally, well, first I'm going to answer my old friend Clara from our Oxfam days, long time ago. So glad you're here. I think that we will be continuing these conversations. So I think it is entirely possible that we will be doing another one of these in the next few months. And, so stay tuned for that. And then I will just reintroduce myself, though you're all on my page. But Tim Fullerton, I'm the founder and CEO of Fullerton Strategies. We, where these two guys do most of their efforts are on the influencer side. We are more of a marketing agency. I do fractional CMO work for businesses, both large financial services companies. We've got some public universities and also some small businesses as well. So if you have any questions, you can find me on this page, which is just my name, or you can go to Fullerton Strategies. So with that, we have made it to 12:59. We got an hour into this. I think it's judging by the chat over here, which I can put in the overlay so people can see it. But people seem to really value this. So I want to thank you guys. And I want to thank everybody who is listening. We still have 20, 30 people still on after an hour, which is a pretty good sign that we've done a good job. So thank you again for both everybody here and also Tiffany and Ryan for joining us today. And we look forward to having another one of these in the near future. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.